Good morning, everyone. If I could have everyone just kind of come on in, and everybody's excited. It's always good to be energized by fellow travelers on the journey. So thank you, everyone, for being here this Sunday morning. It's going to be a great morning. We're so excited to have Katie Gordon here with us, back with us. She's just in a quick little Michigan jaunt and then heading back to Pennsylvania. So good to have you here and your family and friends and everybody. Did you bring your pets? I'm just wondering if no. Okay. Good to have you here. And we're so excited also to have PerShayla here doing some music with us this morning. She's done some online stuff during the lockdown stuff, so good to have her here live and in person this Sunday. This kind of lay of the land this morning. I'm just going to welcome everybody. We're going to have a song, a meditation from Leslie Newman. Leslie, where are you? You're here. Oh, hi, Leslie. Good to have you here as well. And then we're going to have our teaching from Katie. I'll get up and say a few things at the end, and then Patty will sing us out with a mini concert of 3 songs. So thank you all for being here. And without further ado, Patty PerShayla.
Good morning, everybody. Oh, my goodness. Always good to be back here. Been doing the online thing for a while. It's good to see your faces. This one's called None the Wiser. It's starting to taste like blood. Every time I bite my tongue, and you think you're safe when you look the other way. When you look the other way. You're blind in your certainty. I'm crying conspiracy. I see things I shouldn't. Right beside you, but you're not looking. No, you're not looking. But in the back of my mind, in a corner of my eye, well, I have my theories, but I never know who I can trust. So you're none the wiser. Follow me to my hideaway. We'll conspire in our secret place. This revolution, well, it's all for you, love. It's all for you. Nobody can ever know fine as long as you stay close. Your kiss stings like betrayal as they take me away, away,
Good morning, everybody. I offer you a meditation this morning. The silent cacophony of nature, uncut and uncurated. Everything belongs. The purple loosestrife is minding her manners. There's a patch of Phragmites that I'm not worrying about today. Queen Anne's lace and chicory, my favorite combination. I love the yellow dandelions too. Coneflowers, pink and yellow, an old planting. Goldenrod, swamp milkweed. Sumac. Wood sorrel. Tiny asters. Something that's an unpleasant weed in a garden with super sharp thorns in among others. I see its pretty orchid flower, and it's not so ugly at this point. These plants have been sorting themselves out since the last old growth of Michigan was logged. I am thankful that this patch is wet enough that it won't be cleared for yet another home. I'm mindful of a mound that we pass every day, a soil mound delivered onto a tarp early in the spring, a human story here. What happened to the person? What happened to the intention? Every weed in the neighborhood has found a home on this mound, and it's a new mountain. I have a silent walk, except for the dog owners and dogs we meet, except for the woman who offers me a cucumber from her lush garden. I am thankful to the planter of the apple tree we pass. A silent walk. Part of my awareness is on Chester, my dog. The rest is discovery. My walking meditation takes me back to my old street. I chronicle the people who died in 20 years that I lived there. I walk without a phone. I feel free. Namaste.
Thank you, Leslie, for that beautiful meditation. It's a beautiful introduction, I think, into what I'll be sharing with you all this morning. Good morning. It's so good to see you all, even masked and distanced. It's wonderful to see your joyful eyes, and I can tell you're smiling under the masks. At least I hope you are. I come to you from Erie, Pennsylvania, where I now live in a monastic community, a Benedictine community of sisters. And so when I heard that the invitation was to speak about silence, I I thought, sure, yeah, I've learned something about silence in the last couple of years of living in monastic community. And then once I started to put it on paper, I realized how short I fall of the ideal of inner silence that I'm about to speak to you about. So I am sharing this in the humility of being on the journey toward inner silence, as we all are, as the monks that I live with are, and as I'm sure all of you are. So I'm grateful for the chance to share what I am currently learning about monastic silence. And I want to speak to both monastic silence, but also how it is a ground for interspiritual communities as well, and interfaith communities, as this community is. So for the modern monk, both traditional monks and so-called new monastics, silence is a centerpiece. It's not the goal or purpose of the spiritual life, though, but it is sort of the axis around which a day moves or the spiritual life moves. So where does silence show up in the monastery? As you might expect, it shows up in a lot of places, pretty much everywhere, but just in little glimpses here and there. Silence is a through line throughout my days, but not in any romantic, cloistered sense. It's not a pious silence that creates a muted atmosphere. Rather, it's a contemplative silence that shows up occasionally during mealtime, in the morning and evening rituals we each engage in the pauses within our collective prayer, and in many more small moments that aren't empty of meaning, but rather full of emptiness, if that makes sense. It's a positive emptiness, a silence that feeds life rather than stifles or quiets the meaning of life. It took a while to get used to the normalcy of silence in the monastery, and I'm still learning how best to embrace it. Like so many of us, I'm thoroughly conditioned to fill silence with words, with any words, with podcasts, with music, and I often seek words rather than wordlessness. Silence can still be very awkward for me until I learned how to hear a different type of voice in the silence. So in search of a deepened relationship and understanding of silence, I turned to mystics and monastics to figure out where silence comes from and what the purpose of silence is. Recommended by a friend, I picked up a book by Spanish mystic priest Pablo Dors, and a book called The Biography of Silence, A Biography of Silence. He frames silence as an extraordinarily ordinary thing. Early on in his tiny treatise on silence, he wrote, "I must issue a warning that silence, at least as I have lived it, is nothing special. Silence is only the frame and the context that makes everything else possible." Silence, in his form of silent meditation that he's committed to, is primarily a practice of observation, observing more closely what is within and what is outside of you. He wrote, "Pure observation is transformation. As Simone Weil would say, there is no weapon more effective than attention." Silence helps us cultivate, then, the spiritual tool and technology of attention. In Doer's poetic writing, he says that this observation helps grow richer the interior flora and fauna within ourselves. But silence is not just inner landscaping. It's an excavation of true self. He said that through silence, we awaken our inner teacher and let them speak. In his words, meditation is a school of opening to reality. Silence is not for silence's own sake, then, but for the purpose of opening to reality, within and around. This rings true with another idea from Benedictine monk Brother David Steindl-Rast. In his book, A Listening Heart, he shares a story about being anchored in silence. He wrote, "Once our heart is anchored in silence, we will be able to listen even while we are speaking." And he tells this story. During one of the formal teaching sessions at Sonoma Mountain Zen Center, a sparrow started chirping outside. Stopping in mid-sentence, the Roshi put his palms together and bowed in silence, thanking for the bird's song. not to be so wrapped up in our own talk that everything becomes an annoying distraction. That takes practice. Silence will make us hear appeals which noise drowns out. The sights of devastated forests, the groans of lab monkeys with wired skulls, the sobs of mothers with babies at their emaciated breasts. We will begin to hear the truth that sets us free. As long as one creature in this world is oppressed and exploited, oppressor and victim alike lack freedom. From this quote by Brother David, we learn a couple more things about monastic silence. First, silence is something that comes from within. External conditions matter, yes, but ultimately, silence is something we locate within ourselves. Many of us learned this in the last year and a half of pandemic. In the loss of our external lives, most of us had plenty of noise within ourselves. Anxiety, depression, loneliness, longing, the inner dialogue of fear and despair was at an all-time high, and still is. My time in quarantine was nothing like time spent at a hermitage, even though there were many external similarities to the two experiences. Quarantine was actually a time when I faced all the voices within myself and realized how much I needed to learn how to work with them and come to a more true inner silence. At the monastery, I've learned that all monks still work through this, facing the inward demons that steer us away from becoming our full, whole, and holy selves. And of course, I have not achieved inner silence. I don't know any monks or nuns that would claim they have either. We experience moments and glimpses on walks, in nature, and they're fleeting moments. They do not always last long. But that's okay, because this is the second part of what Brother David's quote teaches us. Silence is not the goal in monastic life. It is not the end in and of itself. Silence is the practice that leads us to the more of life. Silence opens us up to the cries of those in need. Silence helps us fulfill the purpose of the spiritual life by leading us into solidarity. When we learn how to shut up, we open up. We hear the cry around us and are able to receive it into our hearts, and we're able and open and free enough to respond. Again, as Brother David said, silence will make us hear appeals which noise drowns out. By practicing silence, he says, we will be able to hear the truth that sets us free. And it not only frees us, but it leads us to fight for the liberation of all creatures around us. In his words, as long as one creature in this world is oppressed and exploited, oppressor and victim alike lack freedom. Silence should not only lead us back into ourselves, but into ourselves so that we may go out and work for the life and liberation of others. Monks are among the people I know who are most committed to this collective liberation, to the solidarity that silence leads us into. Think of Thich Nhat Hanh, Thomas Merton, Dorothy Day. And that's where these two other monastic values come in, which support, uplift, and make possible silence and thus radical openness to the world's needs. Those values, essential for silence and solidarity, are solitude and stability. In order to work towards some sense of silence, we need solitude as well. And not just time away from other people. Solitude is more than aloneness. Solitude is an intentional, positive aloneness. It takes us from aloneness to at oneness. In intentional separation from others, we more easily find the invisible ties between all of us. At the monastery, solitude is an explicit part of community life. In order to show up in community and in relationship, people are given their own space for solitude. This manifests literally in the rooms. Everyone's bedroom is a little sanctuary for their own spiritual life. It's for rest, yes, but it's also for prayer, sacred reading, for study. And a lot of times in community, you need to be able to just go somewhere and shut the door. Walk away from the noise of other people and recenter, reground in your own inner solitude and silence. And solitude is revolutionary not just in religious communities, but for anyone following a calling. The first book I read when I moved to the monastery was A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf. In this little early 20th century feminist manifesto, she links the abilities to have access to one's own creative space to economic, intellectual, and spiritual freedom of women. In that room, a woman can get to know her true self. She can write her own story, express what is her deepest truth, and foster the freedom that comes from opening oneself up from the inside out. So through silence and through solitude, we are led to our true selves, out of which everything else is possible. And there's one more monastic value that fosters this sense of silence and solitude, and that is stability. Stability is a word that I think needs a revival, a reemergence in our consciousness. Stability at first suggests something stagnant, something that doesn't grow or doesn't move, something that stands still to its own detriment. But stability is not stagnant. Stability is really the opposite. It's a choice to grow in place, a choice to stand still in order to reach in deeper and reach out wider. There are two Benedictine vows that speak to this value. The first is the vow of stability. It's a commitment to one monastery, to one place, to one spiritual home for your life. And the other vow is a vow of conversatio, a vow of conversion, of ongoing change and ongoing growth throughout your life. And these two vows together express a commitment to place and a commitment to growth. It is through the stability of place, of deep roots in fertile soil, that one is able to grow and evolve throughout their spiritual life. And it's through stability that one stands still long enough in order to find silence within. From a place of stability, a life that isn't always on the move, that isn't always striving for the greener grass on the other side, one is able to find peace in place and have an active and developed life within oneself. And from that place, we are able to access deeper silence within. When you aren't always worried about where you should go or who you should visit, and instead are committed to staying still and growing deep roots in place, inner silence is something that slowly grows in you throughout your life. So, rooted in stability, grounded in solitude, we cultivate an inner silence, which opens us up to the world. This is monastic silence, as I have come to learn about it. A silence that isn't in and of itself, for itself, but a silence that starts in place, that starts within ourselves, and opens us up to all. Monastic silence leads us to both selfhood and to solidarity. And this is what it means to be anchored in silence. As I mentioned at the beginning, silence is not just for monks and nuns. Silence is liberating for anyone and everyone, especially, I believe, secular and interspiritual communities. Another group I'm a part of, alongside Jewish and Buddhist, agnostic and Christian friends, is Nuns and Nuns. In that community, silence has been the fertile ground of our shared spiritual life. Brother Don Bassan, a Jungian psychologist and Marist brother, told someone in our group once that an interspiritual group meets not in words, but in silence. Shared prayer doesn't require shared words, just a shared presence. And when you come to God or to a wisdom tradition or to a spiritual community through varied frameworks, even varied languages, you can always meet together in silence. In addition to Brother Don, several contemporary theologians and contemplatives have repeated this idea. Dorothy Sowell, mystic activist of the 20th century, wrote in her book, The Silent Cry, that silence is the shared language of all mystical lineages. In silence, we meet beyond words, in expansive silence, not in apathetic silence. Monastic monastic and mystic scholar Beverly Lanzetta wrote in her book, The Monk Within, interreligious dialogue revolves around the great silence. In silence, there is no religion to divide or segregate. There is not a Buddhist silence and a Christian silence and a Jewish silence. There is only silence. And finally, Trappist monk Thomas Merton also wrote about the place beyond words that people meet. Across differences, all are able to meet and participate in what he called the communion and sacrament of silence. Clearly, there is a truth of unity to be accessed that is far beyond words, as these 20th century mystics and prophets have taught us. Silence is a foundation out of which monastic and interspiritual communities alike can grow in their self, in communal bonds, and in spirit. In this noisy world, we must recover the tradition of silence, not for the sake of silence, but for the sake of life itself. Silence opens us up to the struggles that noise and distraction drown out. Silence awakens our senses so that we are not apathetic and deadened to the cries and needs of the climate, of the oppressed. And silence stirs within and between us the interconnection which calls us to honor all life around us. Anchored in silence, may we stay open to the more of life within and beyond ourselves. May silence lead us into solidarity. And in the prayerful words of Rabbi Arthur Waskow, Amen, Amen, Amen. May it be so. May we make it so. May silence lead us into solidarity. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Katie, I was sitting in the back and reflecting upon the journey you've been on. You've been with us a few times here and there, and working with the Kaufman and then Divinity School and stuff. So thank you for including us on your journey. It's always good to have you here and your family. So thank you for being here. I was listening to, and there was a Mary Oliver poem going through my head, and I'll just read a brief word from it. Mary Oliver, A Thousand Mornings. Today I'm flying low and I'm not saying a word. I'm letting all the voodoos of ambition sleep. The world goes on as it must, the bees in the garden rumbling a little, the fish leaping, the gnats getting eaten, and so forth. But I'm taking the day off, quiet as a feather. I hardly move, though really I'm traveling a terrific distance. Stillness, one of the doors into the temple. Mary Oliver. Gotta love Mary. Wow, always good to be in the presence of everyone here. So much going on at C3. Next week we have Kent back. Drew Nelson's going to be joining us for music. We have so many things going on in the community that we're involved in or we initiate. You see them in the newsletter. If you need to get signed up for the newsletter, see Ellie, or you can stop and see me. We'll get you signed up. All these things happen through your kind donation. So if you are able, please donate in the back. There's some boxes in the back, or see me, or we can get you signed up for recurring donations as well to keep this community alive and well and going in the needed space of West Michigan for such things. Just a couple notes. We have book club coming up. We're doing Margaret Willie's book, A Summer of Silk Moss. You can pick up a copy at the bookstore in town. That'd be great. Just support a local independent bookstore. Patty will join us for a couple songs here at the end, but she has merchandise in the back, so make sure you stop and look at her t-shirts. She has some vinyl back there, it looked like. All right, some stickers, some cool things. So looking forward to that. So much going on, and always wonderful to be part of it. So thank you, everyone. And I just want I sit in the back when last week it was happening, and I was getting a note, hey, just saying hi from someone in Ann Arbor. So hello, Ann Arbor, you know who you are. Someone in Traverse City. Hello, Traverse City, you know who you are. And I'm sure it's fun to realize we're connected beyond this room. And so taking a moment to say hello to everyone who's watching us this morning on Facebook Live. So thank you. Patty Baldus, you had a quick announcement, I believe.
If you remember last week, Rod came up and begged for someone to be in charge of the booth for the Hispanic Fiesta. And not knowing any better, I stepped forward and said I would do it. So, but I need your help. We are going to have a booth similar to what we had in 2019. So I need volunteers to bake cookies, and I need volunteers to staff the booth. So if you're interested in helping out in either of those two ways, I'll be in the back, and I have a sign-up sheet, and we'll get in touch for further developments. Thank you.
And one last note before I have Patty come up. Talkback will occur right here in the middle, so if you can help stack out chairs 10 high. Katie needs to get on the road. They're actually driving back immediately following after like any minute to get back to Pennsylvania. So they have some things going on, and I know you get a chance to spend a moment with your family. So thank you again for being here. And Patty PerShayla.
So I was racking my brain to think about songs that I've written that are with the theme, because I know I'm small and I have an acoustic guitar today, but I'm actually quite full of rage most of the time on stage, but it's too early for that. Anyhow, I wrote one song about how I talk too much, and it's probably one of the louder ones I'm going to do today, so find the irony in that, if you will. This one's called Apostrophe. I wish I was more, what's the term for it? Articulate, you know, good with words and shit, yeah. Yeah. But I'm peddling cheap diction, and words burn when I spit 'em. I'm singing to the masses, and you're preaching to the birds. My voice is radio static. Thing on your every word, 'cause you make them count. And I pattern stutter stammering monotone, eventually slip out. Well, they just bow to it. Ooh, baby, see that love is something kind of good. Oh, give me those eyes that work to live by. Yeah, yeah. Oh, you're a whisper in a crowded room, but those who can't listen won't mind the volume. Oh, tell me something good. Yeah, yeah. Scream that needle right out bow. Yeah. Thanks. Sometimes it's hard to remember to play the guitar on these because I'm a bass player at heart. All right, I'm doing some instrumental experimentation today because I haven't played this one on the acoustic yet. But I wrote this with my friend Dave over the internet, which, if you know anything about lag on Zoom, very difficult. This one's called Discovery. It's from the perspective of Isaac Newton in A Bout of Madness, looking for inspiration and not finding it. Of my pen, energy that's never gone, but it's moving on. I wanna keep it for myself. Kisses are just blessings in my ink. Well, 'cause she belongs to no one, no one. Oh, mystery, confounding me, colors undefined. Oh, discovery, be a lady, solidify you in my eye. Well, there's a story in between my body and my dreams, but her visions fade away the more I reach for the heavenly tapestry, only catching gravity. Oh, will she ever come back to me? To me. Oh, mystery, confounding me, colors undefined. Oh, discovery, be a lady, solidify you in my Thank you. That one's a doozy. All right. This one always feels like a nice note to end on. Thanks so much again for having me. It's lovely to be here. This is a really old song of mine. This one's called Shadow Puppets. It's about sticking with people who are good for you. Your eyes glowing bright, just like lanterns in the night. You manipulate the shadows as they dance around the room. Either shape the darkness or it shapes you. Either shape the darkness or it shapes you. 'Cause we are the trick of the light, the figures that it hides behind. Underneath the fort of blankets, we'll be casting shadow puppets well into the night. Just you and I, well into the night. Just you and I. Oh, I'm a girl who likes to play with matches, and you're the boy who got lost in the trees. Together we were reborn from the ashes, ever yours, evermore, evergreen. I'm ever yours, evermore, evergreen. 'Cause we are the trick of the light, the figures that it hides behind. Underneath the board of blankets, we'll be casting shadow puppets well into the night. Just you and I, well into the night. Just you and I. But don't you let the darkness ever get to where your heart is. I fear we may become our silhouettes, but as long as we're together, we'll be warm and bright like embers, and we'll wait to greet the sun like an old friend. Yeah, we'll wait to greet the sun like an old friend. 'Cause we are the trick of the light, the figures that it hides behind. Underneath the board of blankets, we'll be casting shadow puppets well into the night. Just you and I, well into the night. Just you and I, well into the night. Just you and